Principal Matters Podcast, episode 473. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker back with my co host, Dr. Jen Schwanke, for another episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. Jen, this week, guests are going to hear from my dear friend and your dear friend, Darrin Peppard. What a wonderful leader Darrin is. Former principal, now full-time leader consultant, author. So here's my story. Darrin and I, months ago, had set up an interview swap. And so he interviewed me for his show, and then we quickly turned around and opened up a new recording, and I interviewed him for my show. And then because both of us have archives, we put it in the
Right.
bank, and then we were like several months later, we're getting ready to air our shows. And Darrin airs his of me, and I'm like, "Oh, thank you, Darrin." And then I go to air mine, and I can't find the recording. And
Oh,
so I'm like,
no.
no. And so Darrin was like so gracious. He was like, let's just redo.
Yep.
So this is our redo, and so he was so gracious to let me share like his recording of me back on my show. And so we've been doing these swaps, which has been so much fun. But before we listen to this wonderful conversation with Darrin, I just want to ask you this question, because we get Q&As that are sent to us or that you and I encounter. And this was a Q&A that I wanted to bring you from a recent discussion with some leaders, where one of the leaders was just asking for help, facing a situation where teachers were having, for lack of a better word, a disproportionate amount. Is that the right word? And they more students in their class with special needs than students without.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure, okay, how can I better support my teachers when the population of our kids
Right.
is becoming more kids that require IEPs or special support than
Right.
not. And so that could be a whole show, but this
Right.
is usually just you and I in a quick 5-minute response. What are some thoughts that you're having?
Right. Well, and let's expand this to be any disproportionate could also mean a teacher who's just overwhelmed. There's more students than they know how to serve. And then there's the other general education students too. So I think this is going to continue to be an issue as special education numbers do rise, and as many states are facing challenges with their legislators and charter schools and private schools who can, of course, just not serve a student, whereas public schools have to. How do we do this? So I think step one is, has the teacher been given as many supports as they need? That's the first very obvious question. But have they been trained? Is there a paraprofessional or an aide who could support them, even if it's not during the day, or during the student day, but morning or after, with resources or preparation, that kind of thing. And then, I want to go back to training, sort of, which is, has the teacher considered groupings, very deliberate ways to serve students by identifying their needs based on data or the IEP or the 504 or whatever, and then determining how a workshop model with small group instruction might help them meet their needs. And I've got a quick story about a teacher who was able to make this shift, but I wanted to pause to see what you thought about
No, no,
those.
no. And I want to hear that story, but I'll just affirm what you're saying too, which is so many schools are facing the increasing numbers of kids with special needs, but without personnel.
That's right.
Because it's so hard to find teachers with that training, and so that means a lot of people are having to do that training themselves.
That's right.
And in addition, we know that it is a huge support if a para or an aide or another adult support can be present sometimes too, to provide that feedback as well. So sometimes people have to get really creative
Right. Right.
in how that looks. But go ahead and tell that
Well, I
story.
remember working with a teacher once. Her name was Julie, and she just had, that class that comes along every 10 years. Just a lot of needs, a lot of literacy needs. And she said, I just can't do it. There's just no way. And I said, okay, let's sit down and look at data, and let's see what students need fluency help, what students need comprehension help, what students need decoding help. And she was definitely coming from a place of no. She's like, it's not going to work. I have the behavior kids over here. I have the kids with social needs over here. I'm like, let's just try it. I'm like, Julie, you're saying no because you're mad at me because you think that I should have maybe done a better job creating this class list. So I get it, acknowledged, absorbed. We're good. Now let's try and solve the problem. And we were able to try some things, right? And again, we looked at the data so that we were sure that she was making deliberate decisions. And then she worked with small groups. She developed ways through a workshop model approach that students were grouped. And those groups, by the way, were very fluid. So she only kept a group a certain way for a week or two. And then she looked at the data, she looked at progress, she looked at formative assessments and summative assessments, and she would make some changes. Because this was a class where the same students hanging out with the same students all day was a terrible idea. So she was able to really meet their needs and kind of get over that hurdle of, I can't, by grouping students appropriately.
Well, I know this is just a Q&A, so we'll wrap it up here.
So we have to stop.
We do. No, I love that so much, Jen. That's so practical, and it's and I want to point people to a resource because we had a guest on our show a couple of weeks ago, Tim Villegas, who works for the Maryland Coalition for Inclusive Education. Tim is a former special education teacher that now works with an organization that supports schools in stronger, inclusive, trying to figure out how to, and he's got some beautiful stories about the ways that he has shifted his own mindset around meeting the needs. And so I'll put a link in the show notes to MCIE and Tim's interview that I did with him as well. But I just yesterday I was listening to the news because who knows by the time this recording comes out what's going on with our federal government and whether we'll still be in a shutdown or not. But as the Department of Education was announcing it's like shutting down the special education department within that wing, it seems even more overwhelming to like, how are we supposed to support kids when all of the supports are being removed? And I know not all of them are being removed, but it's becoming harder because now that responsibility will be really coming back to states, and then of course back to communities. And we're all still trying to meet these needs and follow the law at the same time. But at the end of the day, that child sitting right in front of you and that parent in that classroom, they don't really, what the laws are saying, what the supports are saying, none of that really matters. They just want to know, how can this child learn?
That's right.
And so I think sometimes it's just important for us to revisit that moment of what can I control?
That's right.
And what can I not control? Yeah. And I have to make a commitment to what I can.
That's right. And do something. Don't just endure it and wait for it to be over. Do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jen, we'll stop there as hard as it is. I would like to keep talking because I want folks to be able to enjoy this conversation today with Darrin Peppard. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for taking time to jump into this conversation with us. Jen, how can folks stay connected with you and your resources?
Yep. Find me at jenschwanke.com. You can reach out for me for more information there, especially if you need me to come and work with your group, or subscribe to my newsletter, Principal Problems with Dr. Jen.
And you can find today's notes and all of these resources at our website at williamdparker.com. So until next time, thanks for doing what matters. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Everyone talks about the power of data-driven instruction, but how do you actually get the right results and know the best next steps? The secret is iExcel. iExcel helps you easily assess performance and determines the best path forward for each student. Whether you need data for benchmarking or intervention planning, iExcel can do it all. And iExcel doesn't stop at assessments. It also provides you with everything else your school needs, from a standards-aligned K-12 curriculum to actionable analytics. iExcel's online learning and teaching platform is research proven to improve student outcomes, and it's used by 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts. If you want to start driving real progress, get started today at iexcel.com/PM.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. And this week, Man, what a joy. We're going to be talking about the road to awesome with my special guest, Darrin Peppard. Darrin Peppard is a dynamic keynote speaker, leadership expert, and consultant with a passion for transforming organizational culture and developing leaders. He's a former award-winning principal and draws from nearly 30 years of experience in education to inspire leaders with clarity, purpose, and joy in their work. He's the author of Road to Awesome, The Journey of a Leader, and Culture, First Classrooms, Leadership Relationships and Practices that Transform Schools. You can find either of his books anywhere on Amazon or online or his website. He hosts the podcast Leaning into Leadership, where he shares real-world insights to help leaders build strong teams and thriving school cultures. And I've had so much fun just becoming friends with Darrin. Darrin, welcome back to Principal Matters Podcast. I say back because I'm just full disclosure. I tried recording with you previously and somehow I didn't push record. And so you were so like amazingly generous after weeks and weeks and weeks of being on the road of saying, yeah, I'll do it again. Well, and so here we are, my friend. Thank you so much. Why don't you fill in the gaps on that intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks. Well, I appreciate that. And honestly, I mean, it's just a joy to just sit down and have a conversation with you. And the fact that we did hit record this time is just a bonus. But it is what it is. I love how you said that I have a passion. Just the way you said passion, I just think is super cool.
Well, you do.
Well, and when I think about leadership, I mean, that is truly something that I'm extremely passionate about. And I know we'll get into this at some point in time, but along my journey, on my path from classroom teacher to AP and principal and superintendent, all that kind of stuff, and now what I do now, I think back on a couple of moments, through the course of my career, kind of those ones that maybe shape you a little bit. And just hearing you with that intro, it took me for some reason to kind of that moment in time where I got the tap on the shoulder. That first time somebody said, you ought to think about leadership. And for me, it was my first principal. And I'm pretty certain it was the summer between my second and third year teaching. And I happened to be at the school. And I think she was asking me to do some recruiting. I mean, we all got tapped in to recruit when you're trying to find more teachers. And I was teaching in Northwest Arizona, and so we could recruit with weather. And I'm a University of Wyoming graduate. And this was back in the day when, there was just like a list of graduates and you just started cold calling people. And
wow,
that was my principal, Betsy Parker, saying, Darrin, you really ought to think about a career in leadership. And what a transformative moment, because,
I love those stories.
from there, so many other things, of course, have transpired. So, you asked me to fill in the gaps. We'll fill in the gaps as we go. But that was just a story that came to mind when I was listening to you talk.
Kudos to Betsy Parker. And, every time I hear someone tell those stories, it just immediately I get flooded with my own memories of the people that have touched my life and leaders that believed in me and were patient with me. And I'm just going to give a shout out to the principal whose position I'd replaced when she retired, Donna Brogan. And man, we had so much fun together. And I just think back to how much time she patiently walked me through the firsts, the first time you do this, or the first time you do this, or the time that she was sitting in a meeting with me and I lost my temper to the point where I had to leave the room and then come back. And then later she had to coach me through how not to lose your temper in a meeting, so all those things,
Yeah.
Darrin, people, I tell people, a lot of people when they work with me, they have this image that Will is this consistently patient, calm, collected guy. And I have to tell them it is a learned practice. That was not my original makeup. And so, but it's because of leaders like that we've been able to learn from and people that can model for us. So I'm glad you started there. You're in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we're recording this at the end of really a busy season for you of just being in schools. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Darrin, to bring is something you often do with leaders, which is you've taken that word awesome, which is a word that connects back to your website and your brand, Road to Awesome, but you've used it to really just outline reminders for leaders of the values that they have to hold on to. So I wanted to ask you to just share that today. How have you taken that acronym and used it as a way to guide leaders through their own practices. And I'm going to ask you, I know we can't spend an hour going through every one of these, but I wrote them down. So I just would, if you don't mind, I would love for you to just give listeners some a quick lesson in how you use awesome
Sure.
as an acronym, and then unpack those for us.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's start with just very quickly kind of the origin of why awesome, and really why Road to Awesome. That goes back to when I was an assistant principal, first year assistant principal in charge of all high school discipline and attendance. And our school, as it turns out, had a pretty toxic culture. And I didn't realize that. I didn't teach there. I moved to this school to be an assistant principal. Ultimately, I became the principal of this school. But that year, we're having that conversation. How do we solve the most important issues in education, right? Like, what do we do about hats and cell phones? That
Mhm.
conversation. And somewhere in the middle of the conversation, somebody asked, Darrin, why does it always have to be about what they do wrong? Why can't it be about what they do right? And for me, two roads diverged. So Robert Frost, two roads diverged in a wood, the road not taken, that famous poem. Certainly I didn't label this, this split for me at that time as the road to awesome. That came later. But it was kind of one of those, I guess, wake up moments in leadership
Mhm.
because we were all about catching people doing things wrong. We were all about punishment to gain compliance.
Mhm.
And in that moment, thinking about, yeah, why does it always have to be about what they do wrong? Maybe just maybe, instead of staying on this path where I'm the hammer and the kids are the nail, what if I show up a little differently? I can't control anybody else. What if I show up differently? What if instead of going and catching kids doing things wrong in the hallways before school starts, what if I just go show up at the door and just greet them and say hi and say good morning and call them by name and build relationships with kids? And we certainly still had negative behaviors to deal with, but really over time, kind of shifting what we were looking for transformed our school. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of the core of Road to Awesome.
I love that
There are a
story.
couple other, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let
There,
me just respond to that quickly,
sure, go
because
ahead.
when you shared that with me before, where that teacher asked you that question, why does it always have to be about what they do wrong? Why can't it be about what they do right? And that was flipped a switch for you of, okay, my expectations are going to make a difference in what I'm looking for and what I am communicating, how I show up, the energy that I'm bringing to the room. It's reminding me of an article that a friend pointed me to. Rebecca Peterson was a National Teacher of the Year from Oklahoma, and I've met her a couple of times, and she's a delightful person. But she almost quit her first year of teaching because she felt so overwhelmed with the negatives until she started practicing a daily ritual of looking for one good thing. And what happened was at the end of each day, when she looked for one good thing, it became two good things and three good things, four good. And pretty soon she was creating moments of good. So it just, and when I've heard that story, Darren, it reminds me of your
Yeah,
story, which is that transformation that happened just in your own leadership. So keep going, because
yeah,
I love that story of that switch that happened.
yeah. Well, it's about mind. It's all about mindset. When we're looking for something, odds are good we're going to find them.
Mm.
On the cover of Road Dawson Journey of a Leader is a photo of me leaning over the hood of my Jeep. I'm a Jeep guy. I love my Jeep. Before I bought my Jeep, I never saw Jeeps on the road. And Jeep owners know this. People who don't drive Jeeps don't necessarily know this. But when two people in a Jeep see each other, they throw the Jeep wave. It's like, I mean, it's a thing. Like, you throw the Jeep wave. And I never saw Jeeps. Now I've owned my Jeep for 10 years. Well, I see Jeeps everywhere I go
That's right.
because I'm looking for them, not
Mhm.
because I'm a trendsetter. No, people didn't just like go buy Jeeps because I bought one. They were out there. I just wasn't looking for them. That same thing is true with how we show up in our schools. If you want to look for great things, there's great things happening in your school. If you want to look for the bad things, there's bad things. It's true in society. It's true in any walk of life. So for me, I just had to start looking for those good things. I had to start leaning into those things that I held important as a leader.
Mm.
And I mean, and that kind of takes us into the acronym, into the whole awesome,
Yeah.
concept and um, what we're looking for, how we choose to show up, the energy we bring, like you said. So much of what we do as a leader isn't necessarily about the words that we use or the things that we say, but about our actions.
Mm.
And, to me, that's what true leadership is. You've heard the quote before. We've all heard the quote before. People won't remember what you say. You know, people won't remember necessarily what you did, but they certainly will remember how you made them feel. As a
Hmm.
leader, your presence, how you show up, how you choose your expectations, just how you communicate, all of those things are just so much more important than just, you know, words on a page or in a document or
Yeah.
um, I don't know about you. I get stuck on this one. Eventually I'm going to get to the awesome acronym. I really will. But I get stuck on this one so often with the leaders that I work with. Every now and again, I'll work with someone who says, "Well, these are my non-negotiables," and I just don't care for that particular phrase. And I used to use it too. These are the non-negotiables. Well, maybe instead we just say, "Hey, these are the expectations, or these are our core values," or
Mm.
those types of things. Anyway, I'm squirrel chasing like crazy today. I really
Well,
am. But
I love your squirrel chasing. I'm going to be the host here and just say out loud, because I took notes before we started. These are the words that awesome stands for, and then I'm going to have you fill in the gaps. So
that'll work
the
well.
A stands for accepting challenge, the W for welcome feedback, the E for examine priorities, the S for stand on your values, the O for operate intentionally, the M for model what you expect, and the E for engage in reflection. And Darrin, I'm just like, every one of those is a chapter. So I don't know how you're going to do this,
Right.
but walk us through why you chose those
Yeah,
as the words that
absolutely.
describe that acronym.
Yeah, so we'll just go in order. Accept the challenge. Look, being a leader is hard. It is. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to accept that being a leader is a challenge. But we also have to accept the challenge that if we want a better collective organization, if we want a better school, if we want a better leadership team, if we want whatever it is that we're focusing on, we have to accept the challenge that to be a better we, I have to be a better me. And so leaning into how do I continue to grow and get better? Because if I'm in a position of leadership, people are watching me. And when they're watching me, I should be modeling, hey, I want to continue to get better. One very quick little story on this one. One of the many clients that I work with, but my longest running client is a principal here in the Omaha area. We've been working together for 4 years. His name is Jason Ryan. Jason's a rock star principal at Papillion La Vista High School. But Jason, every time he introduces me and has done this for 4 years, he tells people, yes, Darrin's my coach. He's here to help me grow and help me get better and give me feedback. He's telling his teachers, he's telling his students, he's telling parents, this is who this is and this is why he is here. If, as the leader of his organization, he has accepted the challenge that he needs to continue to grow and get better, that just sets an incredible example for everybody else within his organization.
Mm. I love that.
Welcoming
So
feedback and support. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Sounds like you had a question on that.
no, no, no. I love that example of Jason because um, you're right. If these positions were easy, everybody would do it, and they're not. And sometimes I think we have this false expectation that someday we're going to get to a place where we show up and everything's so peaceful, I'm not needed. And I mean, you might have a moment like that every once in a while. And you might have the joy of building a staff in the place where you can leave or walk the building and it's not chaos. That's ideal. But you'll never get to a place where there's no conflict because there's
Right.
people, and people are people. And the challenge of leadership is never going to go away. And so I think for me, the goal is not necessarily that it becomes um, easy, but it can become simpler. And so let's go there next. Why is welcoming
Yeah,
feedback a way for you to move toward that goal?
exactly. I mean, that's what it's really all about. if we're going to continue to grow, if we're going to continue to improve as a leader, if our organization is going to improve and continue to get better, we have to be willing to welcome that feedback and we have to be willing to welcome support. And that means feedback and support from all different directions. You
Mhm.
know, as a school leader, maybe this only happened in my school, maybe it didn't happen to yours, but every now and again you get some negative feedback. You know, maybe from a parent, you know, or from a a community member or something along those lines. That feedback is information, and we it's hard to learn not to take things personal, but eventually you get a little bit better at it and a little bit better at it. And you start to understand that when I welcome that feedback, it's an opportunity for me to learn about our organization or about me specifically as a leader. I had a staff member once who, and thankfully this only happened once, but had a staff member once who told me flat out, "You're the worst principal I've ever worked for." And instead of firing back, I took that as an opportunity to reflect.
Mm.
Now, it was a staff member I did not have a good relationship with. She wasn't necessarily doing the things we needed her to do, and that's part of why it was said. But it was also an opportunity for me to say, wait a minute, that's some feedback I need to listen to. What are
Mm.
some things I can do to maybe improve that relationship or to communicate a little bit better? The more that we do that, and another opportunity for welcoming feedback and support is work with a coach. I worked with a leadership coach my last 4 years as a building administrator. It's why I do what I do. It transformed me as a leader. So as leaders, we just have to be willing to welcome that in and not feel defensive, not feel like we're being judged, but look at it as an opportunity to continue to grow and improve.
Yeah. What I love about that posture is where can I grow and get better? And the danger I think sometimes in feedback is positive or negative, is that we allow it to define our identities. And that's dangerous because if I'm letting the feedback define my identity, then I'm seeking for feedback instead of staying true to those things that we know are most important, which may lead to your thing three, examine your priorities. So let's go there, Darrin, in terms of why is that an important leadership focus?
Well, I think this is what it's all about. If you are not clear on what your priorities are, if you're not clear about just exactly how you're going to focus on the important work and let the other stuff maybe kind of slide away, that's how you end up stuck in that constant firefighter world, just
Mm,
running around from one thing to the next and not really doing the work that truly moves the needle. And I mean, this it's something that I think happens to so many leaders. And I think there's a few reasons for it. But one certainly could be that they just want to prove somebody right or somebody wrong. You know, I was a firefighter for a good 2 solid years as the building principal.
mhm,
And I know I was trying to prove I was the right person for the job. And I was trying to prove I wasn't my predecessor. And I was trying to prove that my superintendent made the right choice. And it was trying to prove that those couple of people who said, no, it shouldn't have been you, it should have been this person, I was going to prove them wrong. We have this tendency to fall into that trap. And what happens is we're not clear on what our priorities are. We're not focused on the real work that only, and this is me as a building principal. As the building principal, there are certain things that only I can do. And then there are other work I can delegate to somebody else.
mhm.
Things like crafting and leading that compelling vision. You can't delegate that. That's you. You have to own that. I wasn't doing that work. That was just sitting off to the side. Getting
Mhm.
in the classroom, coaching your teachers, that needs to be you. Now, yes, you can have a team support you, but you need to do that work. You shouldn't delegate that away. I wasn't spending hardly any time in the classroom because I was consumed with all this other stuff. I
Yeah.
needed to really examine my priorities and figure out, where do I want to be? Very quick story on that. My new leadership coach came and the very first day he was with me, I had all this chaos happening and from the front door to the office first thing in the morning, teachers and kids just constantly, hey, I need to talk to you, I need to talk to you, I need to talk to you. And my secretary, hey, I got this, I need to ask you about this. And by the way, Darrin, you got this group of parents sitting in your office. They insist on talking to you about something to do with the cheer program. That was that day with my coach. It was a Monday, you know. I was living that Monday every day. A couple hours later, he pulled me aside and said, "Do you want to be a firefighter or do you want to be a leader? Because
Mhm.
right now your priorities are all messed up. You
Mhm.
need to examine your priorities." And it was a great wake up call for me.
So much wisdom. And I can so relate, and I'm sure leaders can too that are listening. It seems like anytime you step into a new role, especially, and you want to prove that you're valuable, um, sometimes you're jumping into situations where you do need to help. And then other times you're jumping into situations that make you feel like you're helping. And what I hear you saying is figure out what is the most essential purpose of your role. If that's supporting teaching and learning, if that's making sure that you've embraced the structures so that student behavior is being consistently enforced across the school, whatever that role is that you've been given as a leader, and focus your priorities there. And for me, focusing priorities, Darrin, means show me your calendar and whatever you've got scheduled
Yeah.
on there is going to show me your priorities. And if you don't have those things that you set are your responsibilities already scheduled, then they're not really going to be your priorities. Something else is going to drown it out. And those are hard lessons learned, but I think that's just so valuable.
Yeah.
Why
Absolutely.
is stand on your values what you chose for the middle of your acronym?
I think this also ties into, you know, that same conversation with my coach. Once it was firefighter or leader. He said, "Darrin, if you want to be a firefighter, I'm gonna go get in my car and go back
Mm,
to my office because you're a good firefighter. You don't need me. But if you want to be a leader, one, we got to put some systems in place. And
mm,
two, we need to really be clear about what really matters to you. What are you truly all about? What are your core values?" And I'll be honest with you, Will, when he asked me that question, I didn't have a good answer. You know, probably before I stepped into the role, I probably could have told you, hey, this is what I really think is important, you know, in education. But in that moment, I really couldn't. But over some time and you know, through a handful of conversations with a lot of reflection, ultimately I landed on six things that I felt were truly important. And you know, I share those all the time in keynotes and workshops. They're really that's the core of my book, Road Dawson, The Journey of a Leader. But when I share my six values, and I'm going to share here in a sec, I don't expect any leader to have the exact same values that I do. I share them because they're a great example of what, when we really do deep reflection and we really think about what do we care about, that we can ultimately uncover. And so for me, very quickly, my six: one, build and maintain positive culture and climate; two, ensure everyone part of our campus, associated with our campus, feels seen, heard, valued, and trusted; three, um, really empower and embrace student voice; four, lead with, or no, no that's five. Sorry, I just jumped ahead. Four, be the instructional leader of the campus. Five, be um, that person leading with a coaching mindset. And then six is simply be the champion of your organization.
mm,
I just feel like when we are clear about what we're really all about what we're really focused on, about what really matters to us,
mm.
that's how, as leaders, we're able to jump back one and say, okay, what really are my priorities? How do I ensure that that work that I'm doing aligns with what my values are?
I love that so much, Darrin. This morning I was meeting with a group of assistant principals through a virtual group that I'm doing some training with out of state, and we were talking about what is the story you tell yourself when you step into school every day? And we were talking about the tensions of fear on the one hand, sometimes pushing us to maybe become protectionists, or we just want to stamp out any disruptions, or maybe our pride or ego is pushing us to want to be in control or be right, or there's all these competing motivations that push us when we step into a moment of leading. But then the question we were really chewing on, but yeah, if you can move all that out of the way, the fear out of the way, your pride out of the way, what is it you really want to see happening at the school? Now, so what is that vision? What is that narrative you want to, that you're telling yourself? And so that those are so beautiful because the values that you have set on are values that were learned through practice, building that positive culture and celebrating, and everyone is seen and heard and experiencing student voice and being that instructional leader and leading with a coaching mindset and being the champion of your school. All of those values, if you, if, even if you just rehearse those every day as you're stepping into school, you're getting centered again in why I'm here. And so I love that. Anything else you want to add to that before we go to the O?
No, actually, I think you're setting up the O
All
perfectly
right, let's talk about
with what you
operate
just said.
intentionally. What
Yeah.
let's go there.
So this really incorporates those two previous pieces. When we're clear on our priorities and we know what we really value, now we need to go be intentional about the work that
Mm,
we do. We need to go be intentional about our communication. We need to go be intentional about our presence. We need to be just so intentional about what we do. And what does that mean to be intentional? It means you're doing something on purpose, not by happenstance. So, I tell leaders all the time that, if you are doing something, it needs to have a purpose to it. One of my big things that I love to talk about, that I love to push, comes back to when my coach worked with me, but being that instructional leader, you have to be in the classrooms. If you're not in the classrooms, how can you speak about what instruction is in your school? You can't. But so often, leaders go into a classroom without really having an agenda. Oh, I'm
mm,
going to go do walkthroughs. Okay, what are you looking for? I don't know. We'll see. Or, well, there's a couple of things on our evaluation tool, or be very intentional. If you're just going into a classroom and sitting in the back checking your email on your laptop, you're just filling space. You're not actually looking for something that you can help grow a teacher, to give a teacher good feedback, or even just simply to ask some good questions of a teacher. So that's just one simple example, but
mm.
your presence is another one. Be intentional about where you are. I mentioned it in passing earlier, but I was at the front door of my school every single day that I was on campus. And the reason for that was 90% of my kids came in the front door. 90% of my staff came in the front door. 90% of my parents dropped off at the front door. 90% of my buses dropped off at the front door. Why in the world wouldn't I be there? But it wasn't just about being there. It was about leaning into the opportunity to build relationships, to, ask questions of teachers when I saw them in the morning, or talk to kids about, hey, and I saw you at the football game last night, or man, you were so good at the band concert, or whatever, right? Um,
Mm.
but I did that on purpose. It wasn't just, hey, maybe I'll go to the front door today, or, oh, maybe I'll go over here today. It was something I was very intentional about doing. Same thing is true with communication and so many other pieces. I could riff on this for an hour. The intentionality piece alone, I could do a whole hour.
Oh, I love it
But
so much
yeah,
because
yeah,
you're so right. When there's a purpose in what you're doing, don't waste people's time. Make sure that, and I love the example of being in the classrooms too. Even the observation, evaluations, walkthrough tools, whatever you've got. I was having this conversation at lunch with a leader that sometimes as leaders we make the mistake of making the tool the object. A tool is supposed to help you fix something or repair something or build something. If the tool itself becomes the object, you've lost the whole purpose of the tool. And
right.
so what is that intention of so operating intentionally reminds you that everything I'm doing, there's an outcome I want to create here in this special ed meeting or in this disciplinary conversation or in this teacher observation follow-up or in this staff development meeting or in my newsletter. You're right, Darren. You could riff on this for forever.
Oh yeah,
So let's talk about the
yeah,
M. Model what you expect.
yeah. So this one's pretty straightforward, but don't ask something of people that you're not willing to do yourself.
Mm,
And I'll give you a couple quick examples. I'll build off of one I just mentioned. Being at the front door. Um, a school that I work with, Recently, we were almost the entire leadership team is new this year. Half, three of the six are new to the school. And so we're
Mhm.
going through their expectations and all this kind of stuff before they launched into their school year. And one of the individuals said, well, I expect that teachers greet every kid at the door, every class period. And this is a high school that we're talking about. And I said, I think that's great. I think that's a wonderful, very reasonable expectation that many of us have asked of our staff. I ask it of my staff. I said, but what are you doing in the morning?
Mhm.
What are you doing during passing period? Don't ask them to do something you're not willing to do. And he's
Yeah,
like, well, what
get
do you
ready.
mean? I said, well, again, I was at the front door every single day. I actually stopped saying to staff, I expect you to greet kids at the door. I stopped saying it. It was no longer a expectation, a non-negotiable, whatever term you want to put on it, right? I just started doing it. And I never asked anybody to come to the front door with me. But over time, I mean, I had the teachers who were right inside the door started to come out, greet kids. Um, my assistant principals, my AD, who's now a high school principal himself,
Mhm.
he was there every single day, and I never asked any of them to do it. They just followed my lead.
I
Inside the
love that.
building, our teachers were greeting kids at the door. Why? Because that's what we were modeling. It just you can say go do this, but again, they're watching. If your actions don't match what you're
Mhm.
saying, then they're not going to follow through on that. But if you model what you expect, here's another one. In the classroom, I hear administrators frequently, you know, yes, there's a place for direct instruction, but I don't want to see nonstop direct instruction. Okay. So what do your staff meetings look like?
Amen.
Model what you expect. If you
Mhm.
want them to do interactive activities, if you want their voice more than the teacher voice, then your staff meetings need to model what you expect. It's an opportunity to share, instructional strategies that are really, really good, that are really engaging. But if all you do is stand and deliver, you're kind of telling them, hey, I expect you to do something different, but I don't know how to do it.
Oh,
You got to be
Darren.
willing to try.
Yeah. So
So, and
what?
again, I could riff on this one for an hour
No, me too,
too.
because I'm just sitting here thinking that the wisdom in that is for any leader who's listening, whether you're serving in the role of maybe you're an aspiring leader, but maybe you're already in an administrative role, assistant principal, principal, whatever your role. When you think back to the best classrooms, they always have the same values that you're describing right here. And the responsibility of a leader is to make their campus their classroom. And there's no better way to inspire a teacher on how to lead their classroom than by you modeling how you lead the campus the same way. So,
Exactly.
if where do my kids start at the beginning of their day, and how do I make sure that that setting is welcoming, how that setting is orderly, how that setting is comfortable, how that setting has expectations? When my kids are going through passing periods. So you could take every part of your school, beginning day, ending day, transition day, lunchtime, athletics, whatever it is. And if my campus has expectations that are running like a good classroom, then it's a whole lot easier for me to expect those things to be happening in the classrooms too, because it's being
Absolutely.
modeled. Man, I love this so much. Let's, I think this last area is going to be one that you and I both have enjoyed talking about
Yeah.
off the air too. Why is engage in reflection the last category of awesome that you encourage leaders to consider?
I think for a couple of reasons. I mean, it is very strategically placed there because reflection needs to kind of come at the end of a day, end of a week, end of a school year, end of a semester. I mean, all of those things. But we don't learn by experience. We learn by reflecting on our experience. Otherwise, we just keep making the same mistakes over
Mhm.
and over and over. And this was one of those things that for me as a school leader became so incredibly powerful. And I wasn't doing it at first because all I was doing was fighting fires. And it was something my coach really kind of pushed me to do. He said, I want you to spend some time reflecting. And there was a point in time he was at the school. He's like, hey, I'm going to be back in 3 weeks. I want you to reflect on these couple of things. I found myself, so quick backstory. I was a basketball coach. As a head basketball coach, big school in Arizona, um, I relied on video. We videoed everything. I mean, we videoed practice, we videoed the game. If I could have videoed them going to the bus, I would have videoed that, right? Like that was important to me. I needed that as a leader. I needed somebody like I needed a drone following me around so I could go to the tape and see what did I do, right? But that wasn't going to happen. I found myself standing on the balcony above our main gymnasium and just looking down at the floor. And before I knew it, I started reflecting on those six things that I talked about earlier. And it became a regular practice.
Mhm.
In my mind's eye, I would put those six things down on the basketball court and just ask myself, okay, what evidence do you have that you are still focused on building and maintaining positive culture and climate?
Mhm.
What evidence do you have that you are embracing and empowering student voice? What
Mhm.
evidence do you have? And so forth, right? So that became a pretty powerful practice. Um,
Mhm.
Interesting little side story on that. The first time I did it, the side of the arena that I was standing on, that balcony also serves as a walkway between the main hallway and the pool. And students were going across. I don't know about you, Will, but I'm one who thinks out loud. So I talked to myself. And that's what I was doing. And I think the kids thought I was losing my mind because after a short period of time, my secretary came over and she's like, Darrin, are you okay? But I told her what I was doing. And she's like, okay, I get this. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It became kind of known that that was my balcony time. It actually loops back to M. I was modeling reflection for everyone. I wasn't doing that on purpose, though. I really
Yeah.
was not being intentional about that modeling for others. It was just I needed to be intentional about reflection. And I did that about every 3 or 4 weeks at a point in time. And this is a whole separate conversation around how you leverage your administrative assistant.
Mhm.
My secretary, who had full access to my calendar, full access to my email, started putting balcony on my calendar every now and again. And it
Awesome.
was, Darrin, I know you're not focused on your priorities right now. Get over to the balcony.
Mhm.
And so having that person to help hold me accountable to that reflection, to that, you know, that time to really take a step back, get up on the balcony and get reconnected to my priorities, get
Yeah.
reconnected to my
Yeah.
values, and really start being intentional again with my leadership. Because let's be honest, Will, every leader, no matter how focused they are, no matter how great they are with a calendar, no matter how great they are with, I'm setting the vision, and you still have days where you get stuck in firefighter world. It just happens and you get pulled off track. So to me, that reflection is so, so critical to
It's so
keeping
essential.
you focused.
It is. And Darren, I'm just going to give a free, um, the one of the persons instrumental in introducing us was our friend Frederick Buskey, whose
Yeah.
assistant principal podcast is wonderful, great resource. You should listen to him, listeners, if you're not already. And Frederick, we all three have shared with each other different reflective tools that we use.
Yeah.
And I don't care what tool it is, you need to have something where you're regularly asking those kinds of reflective questions. And I love it that you compared it to watching tape from a game because we need to rewind our own tapes. Frederick has the three questions that what he calls it the 5 minute coaching. One, ask yourself or someone else what went well today. Two, were there any surprises? And three, is there anything you do differently? And so that's just a quick coach, a quick reflection of something you can do just really quickly. Because if you take a moment to do that after an experience, like you said earlier, then you learn by reflecting, not from the experience. It's the reflection that helps you learn. Man, Darren, it's so hard to wrap this up, but I want to
Yeah.
be
So
able to, I
let's
want,
stay on this just really
yeah,
quick
go
though,
ahead.
because I think there's one other piece that you and I talked about this once before. It
Mhm.
might have been the time we didn't hit record, but I know that Frederick and you once used one of my reflection
Yes.
tools: start, stop, continue, consider.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I think you guys were on a hike or
We were on a
something.
hike. We were out in
So
the middle of the woods backpacking, and we, I think, I can't remember if it was morning or evening. I just remember him pulling out his notebook and saying, let's do this practice from Darrin taught me. And, what is it that you're going to stop doing that you're currently doing? What is it that you're going to, what is it? Start, stop,
Continue and
continue,
consider.
consider. Yeah. And so just walking through those statements with your own practices, it gives you focus. The SWOT analysis does that. I use the
Yep.
7 coaching questions from Michael Bungay Stanier. There's so many different reflection tools. And what I've come to discover over time is it's not necessarily, again, it's not the tool that matters. It's what you use the tool for that leads you to that. Well, Darrin, how can
100%.
listeners, um, you're just such a kindred spirit. And so I'm so glad that you were able to come back with me so I could have you as a guest on my show. I'm so grateful for the time you let me be on yours. But I want listeners to become your friend. So tell them how they can stay connected with you and any parting words of advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being connected with me, you've got a couple of different locations that you can go. On social media, I'm Darrin M. Peppard on literally every platform, so I'm easy to find. A website. So our primary focus website is roadtoawesome.net. That's where all the books that we publish through Road to Awesome, that's where my coaching stuff is. So many great resources. And you can also go to darrinpeppard.com. That's a newer website, but certainly another one that kind of focuses a lot more on speaking and coaching workshops and that type of stuff. So lots of great resources. As far as any final words of wisdom, knowing when this podcast is releasing, you're at a point in time, school leaders, in early November, that the the honeymoon ended a long time ago. Yeah, you're into that second quarter. You're kind of in the grind. I would go back to something that Will and I were talking about right at the end of this podcast. And maybe you can use the entire awesome framework to do this, but find some time to reflect. Get up out of the weeds, because in November, you're deep in the weeds. You're deep in the work, but you had some amazing plans. You had some amazing ideas, some awesome goals back in August and in September. Take a little bit of time, 10, 15 minutes, put it on your calendar, treat it as if it's, a visit from the superintendent. It can't be canceled. It can't be missed. Go find a place, spend a little time reflecting, whether you use the awesome framework, start, stop, continue, consider, the 7 coaching, or whatever you do to reflect. But take the time to reconnect with what you were thinking about when this year began, because when you let that get away from you, before you know it, it's April or May, and you're thinking, well, maybe we'll dust off those goals and try again next year. Don't do that. Get yourself reconnected now.
The honeymoon is over. Time for reflection, because reflection is where the learning happens. Darrin Peppard, I'm just so selfishly grateful that I got to do this again, because, man, spending time with you just fills my bucket. So thank you so much for your leadership. And Principal Matters listeners, Road to Awesome with Darrin Peppard is a place that you need to be visiting. You need to be frequenting his website, his podcast, Leaning into Leadership. You know that I love to promote my friends who do great coaching and keynote speaking and all those things that I find so valuable in my learning. And I just want you to reach out to Darrin if you're resonating with his message and you want to connect with him. So Darrin, thank you so much for the great work that you're doing. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for listening and learning together today, because what you do matters. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters.